Hello guys, welcome to my SQL series on Learn In. My name is Nse. In the previous lesson, we saw how to set up MySQL. So I assume that you have MySQL set up by now. If you don't, please refer to the video on MySQL basics. The link to this video is provided in the description. In today's lesson, we are going to learn how to see available databases, create a database, drop a database, use a database, see the current database in use. So let's get started. For this, we are going to use MySQL command line client. So let's bring back my SQL command line client. Come here, type my SQL. Here is the command line client. Click on it. Okay, so now we have it open. Remember the password that you chose while we were running the setup. Enter that password here. I'm just going to enter mine. And then hit the enter key of your keyboard. So if you have your command line client looking like this, then you are in order. So notice here that we have MySQL by the left side here. So like I said while introducing the course, we are going to learn how to create a database. But right before we create any database, I want us to check to see if we have any databases in the server. So for that, this is the command to use, show databases. Let's go back to my SQL command line client and type in this command. And do not forget to end with a semicolon, just like this. Remember that in the previous lesson, I mentioned that semicolon is the way MySQL is able to tell the end of a command. So until you have a semicolon just like this at the end of your command or query, your command or query will not be executed because MySQL will keep expecting more characters added to the query. So now if you have your command typed like this, show databases with a semicolon, hit the enter key of your keyboard and notice here that we have this table that has database here and then a list of other things under it. Now these other items under it are the available databases. Now if you have your command typed correctly like this, show databases, and you have ended it with a semicolon, hit the enter key of your keyboard and notice here now that we have this shown to us. This is showing all the databases that I currently have on my SQL server. This information schema, MySQL and performance schema SYS. To further prove what I just mentioned about the importance of ending with a semicolon, let's bring back this query. You can do that by simply tapping on the up arrow button of your keyboard. Okay, so now I'm going to take out this semicolon and then I'm going to hit enter. Now notice that the query doesn't run. Rather, I have this pointer still blinking here and I could type in more commands if I wanted to. The database here doesn't make any sense, but I'm just using it to show what happens if you do not use a semicolon. So I'm just going to take this out. So this here is introducing a new line. If I hit the enter key of my keyboard again, you're still going to see that we have another new line. So as long as there is no semicolon, MySQL will not know that you are done typing your command. So now I am going to introduce a semicolon and I'm going to hit the enter key of my keyboard. Now notice that we have something output here to us, showing that this command has been executed. I hope that you get the point. As we have already seen, this command show databases displays all the databases available on the MySQL server that you are connected to, just like we have seen here displayed to us. It is important to note that the list of databases may vary from one MySQL server to another, depending on the specific configuration and setup of each server. Every MySQL server can have its own set of databases, and the databases you have in your own server may differ from the databases in another server. All I'm trying to say here is that it is possible that the databases shown to you right now are different from the ones you see listed on my screen now. If that is the case, don't be bothered. You're seeing all the databases that your own server currently has present. I hope that you get the point. You must be wondering where all these databases came from when we have not created any database yet. So this brings me to saying that when you install MySQL, default databases are set up. It is these default databases that we have displayed here. Also, I want to point out that one MySQL server can hold more than one database, just like we can see here. In my case now, I have 1, 2, 3, 4. That's obviously more than one database. That's 4 databases listed. So before you go on to creating any new database, you may want to take a look at what databases currently exist. Then you should use the command show databases, and you will have all the databases in your MySQL server displayed. I hope that you get the point. Otherwise, if you have any concerns or questions or comments, please say them in the comment section. So now we are ready to create our first database. So to create a database, the command that you need to type is this command here, create database, and then enter the database name. Now, while entering your database name, you do not need to include this angle brackets, this one and this one. Just type in the database name and end with a semicolon. So let's come back here to command line client and create a database. Type the command create database and the name of your database, any name that you like. Yeah, I'm just going to call mine library, and I'll end with a semicolon, of course, and then hit the enter key of your keyboard. Notice here that our command has run successfully because there are no errors shown on the screen. Rather, we have query OK, 1 row affected. So that database has been created. Let's just show databases again. And if you look in this list of databases displayed, you're going to see that we have library written in here. Now, I want to point out that while naming your database, if you have more than one word, it is good practice to link those words with an underscore. Linking words with underscore is known as snake casing. You can also write the words together, capitalizing each new word. Let me show you what I mean. Let's say that we want to use bookstore. Bookstore is obviously 2 words. So you cannot have book space and then store like this. It's going to cause issues. Let's see that. Create database, book, space, and store. Let's end with a semicolon and let's hit the enter key of the keyboard. Now notice that there is this error here. You have an error in your SQL syntax. So this is not an accepted syntax. So what you should rather do in this case is have something like create database book underscore store semicolon and then hit the enter key of your keyboard. And now notice that that query runs successfully. We have here query okay, one row affected. And if we show databases, you're going to see that we have bookstore created here. Now, alternatively, you can have the camel casing, in which case you begin each new word with an uppercase letter, just like this. Create database bookshop semicolon and then hit the enter key of your keyboard. And then if we show databases, notice that we have bookshop listed in the list of databases that we have available. I also want to point out that MySQL is not case sensitive when it comes to database names, table names, column names, or other identifiers. However, you have to ensure that your letters for each word are in the same order. Let's say you have create database book semicolon. Of course, the database is going to be created. Then I'm going to use a command that we have not seen before just to demonstrate this. We are going to get there, don't worry. I'm going to say use book. I'll spell it mixing up the letter casing noun. I want to say book like this and uppercase O and like this. Use book semicolon and then hit the enter key of the keyboard. Now notice that this query is still okay. Even though while creating the table, I used lowercase all through, and now trying to use this database name in another query, I mixed up the letter casing. I have both uppercase and lowercase letters mixed up. Now, on MySQL, that will work just fine as long as the letters are arranged in the same order. Now, if I try to do something like use, I'm going to deliberately misspell this. If I have something like this, now let's execute this command. Now notice here that I have an error. It says unknown database, BKOO, whatever that is. So the point I'm trying to make here is that MySQL doesn't care whether you're using uppercase letters or lowercase letters, as long as the word is spelled in the same order. I hope that you get the point. So that's how to create a database. One more time, let's show databases just so that we have all the databases that we have created listed here. Now remember that while introducing this course, I said that we will be using both the command line client and MySQL workbench. So let's spring up the workbench. Come here, type MySQL. Here's the workbench. Click on it. And it's going to open like this. If you want it to fill your entire screen, you can click this button here and you will have it cover the entire screen. But I'm okay with mine being placed like this, just so that you can have a clear view of what is going on here in command line client and here in the workbench. So come here, click on local instance and enter that password, the same password that you created during the installation. Now you can either hit the enter key of your keyboard or click OK here, and then the workbench is open. Now notice here that we have all the databases that we have created so far listed here. We have book, bookstore, bookshop, library, and yeah, we also have book, bookstore, bookshop, library, and so on. If you're not able to see your list of databases shown here on this part where I have my mouse, ensure that here you have schemas, not administration. Click on schemas instead, And then if you do not still see the databases listed, click on this refresh button and you'll be able to see your databases listed here. I want to also point out here that we have the databases we created on command line client listed here in my SQL Workbench. That is because both my SQL Workbench and the command line client are connected to the same MySQL server. The difference here only lies in the user interface and functionality of the two tools. My SQL Workbench is a tool. My SQL command line client is a tool also. So you can decide to use either command line client or my SQL Workbench. Whichever one that you are comfortable with using will work just fine. So in here, in the Workbench, just like we created a database using command line client, we can create a database here with the exact same command. We can say create database, and let's give this database a name. Let's say workbench underscore book underscore store. And of course, let's not forget our semicolon. Here, if you hit enter, it only introduces a new line. So to run this query, click on the lightning bolt icon here and look below here. We have the terminal here, the workbench terminal. Create database workbench bookstore, and it has a message here, one row affected, just like we had here in command line when we created our database, one row affected. Okay, so in here we have created our database and everything is working fine. So let's show databases, semicolon. Now to execute the statement under the keyboard cursor, like we have the cursor blinking here on line 2, click on this icon here that if you place your mouse pointer over it, you're going to see it says execute the statement under the cursor. So let's click on it and notice here now that we have our list of databases shown, and of course Workbench Bookstore is part of the databases listed. Here on the Workbench, you may not want to type show databases, especially because you can easily just click on this refresh button and your database will be listed. Like if we click on here, you're going to see Workbench Bookstore created. Let's create another database. I'm going to just say create database skills semicolon. Now, because this is the only line that I want to run here on this query one, I'm going to place my cursor here and then I'll click on this icon that says execute the statement under the keyboard cursor. So when I click on it, you can see that while I have these other queries here, create database workbench, show databases, those ones did not run. It is only create database skills that ran, and we know that because here on the terminal the only feedback returned to us is about create database skills, and it says one row affected. We do not have any error, so that means that this database has been created. Now, just to prove that, you could simply click on this refresh icon here and you will see your newly created database listed in the list of schemas here. Here on Workbench, you'd notice that we have schemas here. It's the same thing as saying databases. Yeah, Workbench is going to say schemas in place of databases. So let's click on this refresh button and I'll notice that we have skills now listed here, even without typing the query show databases. I hope that that is clear. So now, to further prove that command line and Workbench do the exact same thing, let's come to command line and let's show databases. Hit the enter key of the keyboard. Let me bring back the Workbench. So notice that the two new databases that we created here in Workbench, Workbench Bookstore and Skills, they are here now listed on the command line client. We have skills here and we have workbench bookstore here. So basically these two tools would do the exact same thing. It's up to you to decide which one to use. Now let's see how to drop a database. Just like you are able to create a database, you can also drop a database. Dropping a database means that you are completely removing that database from the database server. And you can achieve that just by typing this command, drop database, and the database name. Now let's head over to the command line client and see how that works. So here in the command line client, I'd say let's drop the database book. So I'm going to come here and I will type drop database and the name of the database book, and of course the semicolon, and then I'll hit the enter key of the keyboard. It says query OK. Let's show databases now. Now notice that we no longer have book listed to us here. We had book just before running this query. Now that we've run this query, we no longer have book anywhere listed among the databases that are currently available. That is because book has been removed. Now, if we go back to MySQL Workbench, there is still book here. All I have to do is refresh the schemas by clicking on this button and notice that book is gone. Now, right here in the workbench, we can also drop a database. We can say drop database. I'm going to drop bookshop. I'm going to click here because I want to execute only this line. So I'll click here and look here in the terminal. We do not have any error. This query executed successfully. Now, if you look here under the schemas, we no longer have bookshop, and that's gone. That means that we have been able to remove the database bookshop from our list of databases. While you are able to drop a database, it is very important to note that dropping a database removes it and all its associated data, and it cannot be easily recovered. You have to note that and always be very conscious of it. So therefore, it is crucial to double check and ensure that you are targeting the correct database before executing a drop database command. Also, it is recommended that you take proper precautions and regularly back up your databases to help in avoiding accidental data loss. Yeah, so you have to be very careful and you have to be doubly sure that you want to drop a database before you go ahead to execute the drop database query. Now we have seen how to create a database. We have seen how to drop a database. Thankfully, we didn't drop all the database that we created. So now let's see how to use a database. So to use a database, it's you telling MySQL that of all the databases I have in the server, pick this particular database for me to use. We've seen that there could be more than one database in a server. So for you to be able to use any of those databases, you have to let MySQL know the specific database that you want to use. And we do that using this command, use database name, use, and then you provide the name of the database that you want to use. Notice how I am switching between command and query. It's the same thing. So if I say query, I mean command. If I say command, I'm referring to a query. So let's come back here to command line. I might also want to spring up the workbench. So here on the command line, before I go ahead to specify the database that I want to use. Remember that while on Workbench, we dropped a database. So here in my SQL, I want to be sure of which databases I currently have available. So I'm going to show databases. I'll hit the enter key of my keyboard, and these are the databases left. I want to use this bookstore. So I'll simply say use book underscore store semicolon. Always remember the semicolon, and then I'll hit the enter key of my keyboard. And now notice here it says database changed. This means that we have been able to change the database in use to the bookstore database. There's a command that helps us to be sure of the particular database that we are currently working with, and that is the select database command. And notice that it has parentheses here. It is the only command that has parentheses so far since we started talking about commands. That is very important to note. So to see the current database in use, simply type select database with just like this with the parentheses and then the semicolon. Let's come back to command line cleanse and let's type select database with parentheses and then semicolon, and then hit the enter key of the keyboard. So notice here that it says we are using the bookstore. So we can see here that the database that we are using is the bookstore database. And it's as simple as that. Let's say that we want to now use skills database. Simply type use skills semicolon, hit the enter key of your keyboard, and then notice that database has changed again. Now let's select database again, hit the enter key of the keyboard. Now notice that we have skills returned to us here. So the database in use here is skills. In the workbench, you can easily just select the database that you want to work with just by double clicking on it like this. And if we run the command select database, you are going to see that we have skills here returned to us. So in today's lesson, we have learned how to see available databases using the command show databases. We have also seen how to create a database using the create database command. We have seen how to drop a database using the drop database command. We have seen how to select the database to use using the use command. We have also learned how to check the current database in use using the select database command. And that's all that we have learned in this lesson. In the next lesson, we are going to see how to populate the database with data. And to do that, we are going to create tables and insert data into those tables. That's it for today's lesson. If you have any questions, if you have any comments, say them in the comment section. Also, do not forget to like and share this video, as well as subscribe to Learn In. Thank you for watching. See you in the next lesson.